Hi, my name is James Hannon, and this is my entry for the 2014 Christmas Ornament Challenge. I bought my first lathe in February or March of this year when it was far too cold to go anywhere near it. And I've been having a lot of fun with it since then, and I hope to keep on turning for years to come. I've been busy all month finishing various wooden Christmas presents, as well as my entry for the Woodworkers Fighting Cancer toy box build, and while I originally intended to only make one of these ornaments, I thought I'd better make enough parts for two of them in case something goes wrong with one. That way, if nothing goes wrong with one, I can give one to my mom. But then my sister might get jealous that she didn't get one, so I better make enough parts for three of them. But then my wife's parents might get jealous that they didn't get one, so maybe I should make four. In the end, I made 5 of these things, and I have only a humble slideshow to show for it. I'd like to thank Carl Jacobson and Al Stratton for their sponsorship, and look forward to participating next year, hopefully with a real video. I started out with some walnut, cherry, and the whitest maple board I've ever seen. I used a jig I built to straighten the boards and ran them through the planer about 100 times to get them down to a ½ inch. My wife said that was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. I cut the walnut into trapezoids of various widths and cut the maple to fit on either side of them. Everyone seems to have these Irwin clamps. There's a couple of cauls holding everything flat against my workbench while it's clamped together sideways. Once the layers were all glued up, I ran them through the planer again to make sure they were all the same width and flat. After that, I glued them all up into one big block. I also glued up a big block of just maple. I used my miter saw to cut 1-inch slices off of each block, and used my table saw with a 45-degree sled I built to cut the corners off of each slice. Using 2 tree slices and 2 blank slices, I glued them together into a cube. On the bottom of the cube, I glued a piece of cedar so that it looked like the ground, and on top I glued a whole piece of maple, as well as a piece of ash to be used mostly as a waste block. That was a terrible idea. I used the ash because it was the least expensive wood that I had on hand, but it was so unnecessarily heavy and hard. This picture is a few different things, but the big Christmas tree picture on the right is a face view of what the ornament would look like. I drew a circle with a compass and measured the width of the ornament at each layer. Each layer was 3½ inches wide and ½ inch thick, and I had 7 layers, making a cube 3½ inches on each side with a 1-inch cube hole in the middle to make it lighter. This picture is an overhead view of what the glued up block would look like, with circles drawn indicating the circumference of the ornament at each layer. This was the first ornament I started turning. I kinda impressed myself with how well I made a sphere on my first attempt free-handed. After that, it was repeat, 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 and after that, I got into finial mass production. I've been into woodworking for about 2 years now, and I've hardly made any 2 things similar, so this was unusual, making 5 ornaments the same. So I tried to make up for it by making 5 different finials. And this is what I ended up with. Most of them I dry sanded, but the second one from the left I wet sanded with some mineral oil. Mostly just to see what would happen. Most of the time I don't know what will happen with the things I'm trying, but I'm happy to find out each time. The rest of them are finished with some Blue Label paste wax that worked out really well because it's basically invisible and leaves the maple really white. I did get a fair amount of chip out on them because it's basically end grain the whole way around. If I were to do this again, I'd probably try to build the slices individually to avoid this problem, but I fixed it reasonably well with some wood filler. Thanks to everyone for watching, and thanks again to Carl and Al for setting this up.